Hello and welcome to today's Insight Live, the expert's take. I'm Jason Rader and I'll be your host as we talk today about carrier and connectivity, how leaders can leverage 5G, Wi-Fi, and more. With these guys who are about to lead us through this conversation, we've got with us Christopher Hurd, who's a senior manager with Carrier Services here with me at Insight, and we welcome Frank Garcia, who's a solutions architect at Verizon. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, Jason.
So, and thanks for all of you guys out there. We'll talk about the poll that you answered later. Please get your comments coming in. We'd love to refer to those as we go through. So guys, let's kind of kick it off, because I think when I think about this topic, there's some things that we probably should kind of set the stage for the rest of the conversation. And I think when I see 5G, I see it on my phone, but let's talk about some nuances related to that for the folks that are tuning in that want to know more about this. What's the difference between carrier and private 5G? Let's start there, and round robin. But why don't you start, Christopher? Excuse me.
Yeah. So I think first of all, when we look at 5G, it's important to define it and what is it going to allow. So it's this next evolution of transport. So high reliability, ultra fast speeds, low latency, session persistency, that unlocks the door for a lot of new solutions across a whole host of different segments and industries. And so when we look at this, that can be deployed in a private setting. So as an organization, you can engineer your modern network at a location or across all of your locations and take advantage of that as an alternative, where you create your own private network. So the folks within that network, the machines, the automation, all of that runs through that private network, where 5G is the backhaul transport, as an alternative to traditional broadband, Ethernet, or fiber connection, right?
Understood. Anything to add there, Frank?
Yeah, no, I think, Chris, you did a wonderful job there in explaining exactly what the question was. I do want to add a couple of other things as it relates to, 5G. Obviously, it's in use today, mostly on the commercial side in terms of majority of the consumers out there that, say they're on the Verizon network or any of the other carriers out there using it on consumer type devices. But the way we look at 5G, it's basically evolving into, as we see it, the next industrial revolution. The capabilities that it will bring to the business world. We're just at the starting stage of everything. And, initial 5G is rolled out to the masses, right? The consumers. And the way it's being used today is, obviously lower latency, faster throughput speed. So, you're getting better experiences with applications that are being used today. But in the future, and actually not so much future, what's happening today and in the near future, when businesses start utilizing this technology within their business boundaries in a private setting where they control QoS, where they're managing it, where they're able to adjust on the fly their processes, it's going to bring so much more to their business. So I would just say that today in the consumer space, it's everywhere. And now we're starting to see a lot of adoption and tremendous growth in the business space, especially around on-site LTE 5G private network.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And Jason, if I could add to that a little bit, one of the things I think you see, to Frank's point, it's here today, right? And I think one of the greatest use cases we see as end users is we see it on our devices, our smartphones, our tablets, our 5G enabled notebooks, where we're able to participate in voice and data session, Zoom sessions, Teams, videos like this. So the network today can not only allow higher bandwidth type applications with seamless experience, but also with the way that the carrier networks are out there today, you're seeing that coverage go further and deeper into buildings and large venues like malls and other public places where you have that 5G widely available. So as a knowledge worker or just as a consumer, the way that I want to consume content today, I can do that in a way where I have faster access to higher bandwidth type applications and have a great experience. That we see that immediately today. The potential from an enterprise perspective is massive as we see these kind of ultra reliable, low latency communication type solutions that are right here being evaluated today and being deployed and tested in customers across the globe.
Nice. So you guys got me excited about the possibilities here, but I do want to kind of, because I think, as you both said, people are just now recognizing the possibilities, right, that they can do, and that this happens with the cloud. It happened with just about anything that's something that's going to really change. I love revolution. That's going to revolutionize the way that we do things. You've got the early adopters, you've got the carrier services that are coming into play that are offering things. So you've got a lot of people who maybe think they know what's going on, and things have nuancedly changed to maybe they need to know. And I'm talking specifically about like CBRS or those kinds of things. So it's worthy to kind of at least talk about the differences or the nuances of that in comparison as we move forward. Not that we're going to focus hugely on it, but I'd love to kind of get that out on the mat here. Frank, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, so CBRS, it's obviously a frequency that's out there that's been around for a while. And as we all know, these frequencies are owned by governments, right? And they've been very good about, and I'd say probably the last 10 years, at auctioning out frequencies to be utilized in a commercial space. So allowing public carriers to start selling this for various types of consumers. Just recently, obviously, CBRS was auctioned off, I think, this past year, and there were some players in it. But for the most part, what it is it's citizens broadband radio services. And I look at it as there's three tiers. First tier is still being used today in the military, communications and radar and so forth by the military, and some satellite companies are still utilizing it. And then tier two is, and the tier one is licensed, meaning that they own that there's barriers that no one can interfere with that communication and so forth. And then there's a tier two, which is priority access licenses. This is where, let's just say, carriers, businesses through auction could have either purchased licenses in the frequency band or possibly been given it by the FCC. A good example would be a campus environment, something that's tied to, I would say, the public sector. And then you have your general authorized access, which, in my opinion, it's more of that Wi-Fi on steroids, but there really isn't all that control in terms of building out security, building out management, and so forth. So depending on the level that you want to basically build your network out, will determine who and all gets involved in helping you as a business design this network.
Understood. And yeah, Christopher, to your point, that's, some of those aren't enterprise solutions and some of those are, right, when we're talking about use for those capabilities. Go a little bit more into that.
Yeah, so when we see I guess what we'll call the convergence between CBRS, private 5G, public 5G, it's going to look a little bit different. So CBRS, to Frank's point, in some of those cases are deployed at a campus or in a large community setting. And we've seen that being utilized to help different disenfranchised communities to have Wi-Fi. And again, no security.
We had about that actually. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You should check out the archives here because we've had some great conversations. But when you look at what enterprises need, right? So security, and I know you're going to love this as our CISO and as a security expert, but security has to be built into the framework and the hub at the very base of that. And so that's really what you see when you're starting to look at why leverage a private 5G network, and then also being able to have that, if you're running those applications, session persistence. So when you leave that campus or you leave it inside the four walls of your office or your manufacturing facility, maybe it's a vehicle, you need to then go out into the macro network and transition over to the carrier 5G, that you can do that seamlessly, still ensuring that you have all the security protocols and everything else that you need for for protecting your applications, protecting your data, protecting your users.
No, that's great. And I think, just different classes of tiers, if you will, of application usage, consumer, or I don't want to say dabbler, but somebody who's trying to extend their network, leveraging some capabilities, versus mission critical and things, autonomous vehicles and those kinds of things. We can't afford, the quality of service aspects. The security aspects are key from an enterprise perspective. And I think so I think the way that I kind of rationalize it, there's things that we're doing today, but I think all of the kind of possibilities that we were kind of talking about involve all of those additional features that an enterprise would demand.
Yeah, and you see that classified in a couple of ways, right? So there's this, and by the way, this is an evolving segment, and various, Gartner and Deloitte and others will talk about different things, but uniformly they've kind of settled in on a couple of terms, right? So FWA, or fixed wireless access, which is this idea of having that gigabit connection speed where you can do things like it unlocks the autonomous vehicles. It's that millimeter wave spectrum. Then you see the enhanced mobile broadband, which is what we were talking about with the consumer experience today. You've got your smartphone, you've got your tablet, you see the 5G up there. You're able to download any of your videos. You're able to host your sessions, your video calls, all that. You're going to see that experience there. But then you're going to see others where it goes into these like massive machine type communications or massive IoT. So what we've done in the past on machine to machine and IoT, now because you have a pipe that's much bigger and it's also faster and there's lower latency, things like power usage. So those little sensors that you have deployed today, and whether it's agriculture or in manufacturing or supply chain, all of those things are going to be using less power. So the battery life becomes better, which means those become more efficient, which also means you can deploy more of those in an area. You could saturate an area much more greatly dense, I guess, if you will, and not have to worry about interference, because the 5G, that millimeter wave network, can actually take care of all that. So then when you think about what does that unlock for us, and we've talked about autonomous vehicles as one of those, but right, if you think about in a warehouse facility, you've got a large vehicle that's driving across, receiving information at any given time. It needs to know where all the other vehicles are. It needs to relate itself to and orient itself where it's at within the warehouse. It also needs to receive the information from the warehouse management system to say, go to this rack, pick up this thing. And so whether it's a forklift or something else, so it'll go get that stuff in the product and then move it somewhere else. But it also needs to make sure it doesn't run over humans, right? So there's some machine learning, there's some AI, there's smart camera technology. All of these next generation things that we're talking about designing and implementing are now possible because you've got that high speed, ultra low latency connection.
Yeah. So we didn't talk about this beforehand. I might make a stupid comment right now, but so you first of all, you talked about some other things. This is like the pipe that we're talking about, right? And so I was going to make this kind of bold statement. I know we're at the early stages of this, but is 5G the new Ethernet?
I would say that the way I like to equate it is 5G is a replacement or possible replacement for fiber services. So it has the capability of gigabit speeds, super, super low latency, and works amazingly well with time sensitive type of application. So if you're running a time sensitive network, as Christopher alluded to, autonomous guided vehicles, especially in a factory floor, safety is of concern, especially also not just vehicles, but then also you have robots doing their part too. And the last thing you want is a robot that you don't have visibility to. It kind of does its own thing. And, safety is always a concern, especially now that a lot of businesses out there, especially in the manufacturing, they are adopting these types of technologies, and they need to have this foundational infrastructure in place to evolve. So one thing is, on-site 5G or private 5G network is the foundation for any future technologies. And one thing that you're going to start seeing a lot of is the adoption of mobile edge computing, which is a perfect fit perfect marriage for the two technologies, because then you're able to do a lot more in terms of machine learning, like you said, Christopher, collect data that you can make business decisions on very, very quickly. And, as an example, manufacturing, if you have an assembly line and typically, when you are changing out an assembly line, that could take months to do. But in today's world, you don't have that time. So with these types of technologies, I think the businesses are going to start having the ability to, on the fly, make these changes to adapt towards the demands of the consumers that are out there. Because, it's just working smarter with these types of technology is what's here and going to even improve in the near future.
Love it. And I think, you mentioned edge, which I think is an interesting topic, because we kind of talk about edge computing and those types of things and where the data resides kind of separately than this. But I think this really changes the way that you can architect that enterprise solution, because now we don't have to have all the processing necessarily. If we can have super fast data transfers, we can do some cooler things and maybe some better things. So I think let's talk about the possibilities. What are some of the things that you think that, okay, we know what we can do, but what are some of the things that are probably coming down the pipe?
Go ahead, Frank.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
follow on.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it, but
Robots and cars, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess you want to kind of maybe, you want to categorize it into a couple areas. One is business critical applications that you're running, and then mission critical applications that you're running. So if we're looking at, business critical applications, that in itself, I had kind of talked about, having, quality assurance built into your assembly line so you can capture those defects that may happen and immediately change things out. So, you're not mass producing something that's going out that's defective. When it comes to mission critical, I think the big driver there is safety. Because, there's a lot of liability with some of these companies out there that are looking to use these, autonomous vehicles, heavy equipment, especially in mining, where a lot of this stuff is kind of remote, and you have workers and equipment and machines working next to each other. You want to make sure that the network is reliable, you have coverage, and the processing power is in place to be able to make those quick decisions that the machines need to make, but then also learn from and continue to improve. So, I mean, if you're looking at various, industries, like I had mentioned in manufacturing, QS, prioritization, predictive, remote diagnostics for machinery. So if it's something that needs to be replaced because, something is going to be running out in the near future, remote diagnostics, especially in the utility space. And, out in California where we are, we have these wildfires that take place. So, having the smart technology in remote locations where you can see and control and, make quick decisions that are going to affect not just the organization, but can affect a population in the area. Machine learning is big, artificial intelligence. But I'll give Christopher an opportunity. Maybe there's something that I missed in that.
No, you covered a lot, and I love it, because when I look at it in a couple ways. So some of it is helping, like immediately, like I mentioned with the enhanced mobile broadband today, with knowledge workers, meaning, we know that work is someplace or something you do, not someplace you go anymore, right? So this idea of remote and hybrid work, you've got to give the tools to those employees to be able to do work anywhere, right? So that's being able to use the macro 5G. And then you look at things like, if I'm evaluating my cost of supporting a location, and you can do a branch or small office location and cut the cord. We're seeing a lot of those conversations with our customers that are saying, well, if I could deploy a router or a gateway that has 5G in primary and failover, I no longer need to wait for a truck roll to come to that location to bring in broadband, to bring in fiber, to bring in whatever it is, the construction that comes with it, the delays, right? If anyone's ever put up a new building or a new location, you know that it's always challenging. On those dates, they slip, and just by the nature of that terrestrial connection. So if you want to be able to stand up an office or a location quickly, and we have some use cases on that, you can roll out a router that supports 5G, put a primary and secondary in there, which will allow you to segment the data or to balance that data as well. And then you can run your entire operations, whether those are point of sale, whether that's a security camera, front of the house, back of the house operations, including things like if you want to be able to provide guest Wi-Fi for those folks, if you come into that quick serve restaurant or that retail location. So those are some use cases today. But we start thinking about like really cool next level. So think about it from a healthcare perspective and the idea of robotics, that if you have ultra reliable, low latency, high speed connection, and you're doing some sort of like robotic surgery, right? And I know it sounds crazy, but this is being evaluated today. That becomes a reality when you have the ability to leverage a 5G connection with that. You could also do things like, as organizations are trying to figure out, how do I get the most out of the employees that I have? Think about it from like a field service perspective. If you have a technician that can go out and then put on an Oculus or some sort of VR headset, and then they can then be connected directly back to an expert somewhere that can see what you're seeing and say, oh, touch this wire, take this off. You can overlay schematics onto equipment or machinery, whether that's in a facility or out in the field. All of that is now possible because of 5G.
I like it. And I think, it's funny because even applications that we typically think about, I love the robotic surgery kind of thing. I mean, what infrastructure are those on today? I mean, this provides probably a lower level of latency, higher pipe, even from standard, what we're thinking of normal baseband connection kind of things that we're doing. This can make everything that we do better, but it also expands it out. I was thinking of battlefield surgery when you first brought that up. I mean, those kinds of things that would never have been possible. I mean, we have to evac a whole bunch of people. We could give them literally, immediate surgeries that could change. And also, I have this massive run-on sentence when I get on a roll here, but when we start to talk about the capabilities, and I lost my train of thought when I was making that funny comment, but I just think that when we have these kinds of capabilities that allow us to go to do better of what we're doing, it can change everything. So, I mean, that's the cool thing about, and I love the angle of this is the new fiber. Right. I think that's cooler than Ethernet. So thanks, Frank, on that. But because it's anywhere that you would consider fiber as the conduit for your connectivity, 5G replaces that. And it can really not just take us to places that we could never go before, but it could make everything that we do better, more secure, and that's pretty exciting to me. So as you can tell,
yeah. I think one of the other things is that this is we talk about these revolutions, right? I love that idea that this is the next revolution in communication and technology. And I describe it as a tsunami, right? It's a wave that's coming. And we've seen lots of waves come our way over the years, cloud computing, right? Every so often there's this next great thing. But globally, when you look at the impact that 5G is going to have, not just here and not just in other leading nations where they're on the front edge of building these 5G networks, but it's going to be everywhere, right? And so it's going to have a global impact, which means time to market for organizations that become early adopters. They'll be able to get out ahead and do a competitive advantage. Governments or other entities that need to provide care in remote locations, that if you now have that massive pervasive network, it just unlocks the possibility. So this is a growing trend that's going to be a tsunami and not a wave. And so I always like to use the analogy, let's get prepared to ride that wave, not get crushed by it. And so I think that's really one of the most important things that people should take away from this is we see this growth curve that's coming. The stats are saying in 2025, between now and 2025, we're going to see an additional 4.2 billion 5G connected devices just in North America, right? When you look at the numbers globally, it's staggering on what that's going to be. So this is not one of these things that's just hot today, gone tomorrow. This is actually going to revolutionize and change the way that we live our lives and the way that we do work.
Yeah, that's Christopher. Just to add to that, this morning, right before we started this session, I read an article, it was a survey that was conducted by the Manufacturing Institute, and they came back with 91% of manufacturers believe 5G connectivity will be important to the future of their business. So, that speaks volumes. And I would say that that's just one segment, one industry in the business world. But I could see this happening in other types of industries. I know you touched on healthcare. They're starting to adopt this immensely. But yeah, there's a tremendous wave that's just churning and growing. And there's going to be so much opportunity. I think I read there is, I believe, like $70 billion opportunity in this space in terms of helping businesses design, implement a 5G private network or LTE network within their boundaries of their business, because they recognize that the technology there can do so much for them, and they're comfortable. They've experienced it with, in terms of their use as a consumer, right? They know the capabilities. Now they know, just imagining that if they have that small private network built in within their business and allow them to kind of manage their business with it, possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
And I think we did a poll beforehand, and thanks to all those folks who help us gather that data. And it basically backs up what you just said. Of the respondents, how is your organization leveraging connected devices was kind of the question. And it was, adding more Wi-Fi. Nobody said that. And I think, to your point, it was the vast majority of them were implementing private 5G. And then the other majority was, I don't know yet. So I think that, the beautiful thing about this is what it can enable. And you talk, that 70 billion is the opportunity to implement this, but the opportunity that will be realized from the implementation of that $70 billion opportunity is, trillions of dollars of additional efficiencies and capabilities that weren't there to begin with. I mean, this is literally like the creation of the internetwork of things that we're talking about. So super excited. And I think, I remember the thought that I lost earlier was, usually when you're driving towards something like this, there's a cost of implementation, the design, implementation, and adoption of the tech, but it's got to pay back. And I think that this is easy to kind of do that math. I mean, we talked a lot about safety, and safety is one of those things that has a gigantic cost associated with it if you don't have it. And I think,
Right.
So that alone is a good play, but all of the efficiencies and the capabilities that this brings is super exciting as well.
Some of the stats on that, we're seeing that 5G by 2035, right? So again, that's a long runway from where we're at, but 3.6 trillion in economic output, and supporting 22.3 million new jobs between now and 2035, right? So again, this is going to become a tool that organizations can leverage to become more efficient, to automate in areas, to leverage their human capital in ways where they can be more productive, to get more value out of that investment in talent, and also be able, again, the basic entry level, I think, is that enhanced mobile broadband, which is the devices that we all use today, getting a better experience. So that could be a tool for retaining that talent you have today. If you can automate a lot of those processes, take those things off their plate so they can focus on other higher value projects, you see that there's money there to be made for organizations that adopt.
So we'd like to finish, because now everybody's stoked that's listening right now. They want to do this. And I always like to kind of throw it back out. Where do folks start? We'll start with you, Christopher, and then Frank, you can have kind of the final word on this. Where do they go now? What do we do? You've sold us.
Yeah, so I would say reach out to any member of this team, right? What I would say is understanding your outcomes, and that's not unusual.
Everybody should start. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So let's figure out what are the outcomes that you want to achieve. And then also understanding maybe what are some of the challenges today that you have, and have a conversation with a trusted partner who is an expert in this space to kind of help you come out, assess the existing environment, and help you build a framework and a roadmap to get you to that outcome. There's some things we didn't talk about there's kind of three flavors of 5G with, your low, mid, and high band. And each of those has a different coverage footprint, a different throughput. So depending on your use cases and your needs, one of those might be more appropriate than the other. So you'll want to understand, what do I want to achieve? How do I tend on using this? And then how do I get there, right? And we can help them get there. Other partners out there also understand this space, can help them define that roadmap.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and just something to add to that, I think the key, like Christopher says, is having a conversation, but ultimately know what the outcome is that you're trying to achieve, because this may not be a fit for every business out there. And, depending on the size of, where you want to deploy this and how many devices you want to connect. And obviously, budgets always come into play as well. But as you had mentioned, Jason, the ROI on this is pretty immediate. And in terms of reducing liability for employment, safety, and so forth, it's just something that comes with it. But, I would say the key is have that conversation, try to understand exactly the various types of solutions that are out there and if they would fit your ultimate outcome that you're trying to achieve. And the partnership that we have with Insight and Verizon, we have the expertise, we have the resources, we can help guide you to that end point. And if you as a business are an early adopter, you're going to benefit. You'll be the first to market. And as we all know, sometimes those early adopters benefit most because they become the market leader in their space. So let us help you get there.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for this lively conversation. I'm sure we've created a lot of folks thinking about how they can wrap their hands around this and go to be a part of the revolution to keep that one going. If you want to know more about what we do, please feel free to visit us at solutions.insight.com. And thanks for joining. Thanks for your participation. And gentlemen, you rock. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Cheers.